My mom grounded me for 16 years, and when I finally found out why, she tried to ground me for 16 more. What happened after my mom treated me like a real-life Rapunzel? My mom grounded me for 16 years, and when I finally found out why, she tried to ground me for 16 more. It all started when I turned 4, and I asked my mom why I'd never gone outside before. "You have a severe immunodeficiency, my love. One touch of the outside air could kill you," she'd say, while installing the new air purifier. For years, I accepted this explanation, because, according to her, she was the only person who'd ever love me. Plus, it's not like I had anyone to tell me otherwise. We lived in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but trees and the occasional butterfly that landed on my duct-taped windowsill. Growing up completely isolated meant I'd never blown out birthday candles with anyone watching except Mom. Never had someone my age tell me a joke. Never knew what it felt like to have someone choose to be my friend. She'd hold me while I cried, stroking my hair and whispering how she'd given up everything to keep me safe, how the special filters cost thousands, how my daily medicine was keeping me alive, how she worked from home just so she'd never have to leave me alone. I believed every word. Then my 16th birthday came around. Mom had promised to make it special. She'd ordered some rare book I'd been begging for that could only be picked up in person at a bookstore 2 hours away. She'd been putting it off for weeks, but the hold expired today. "I'll be back before lunch," she said, kissing my forehead and reciting the usual rules. "Keep the doors locked. Don't answer for anyone." I was sitting in my room, listening to her bike cycle in the distance, when I heard it. A soft knocking at our front door. My heart immediately started racing. No one ever came to our house. Ever. Mom had made sure of that. I crept to the front room and peeked through the peephole. There was a little boy, maybe 6 years old, wearing a shark backpack. Tears were streaming down his face. "Please, I can't find my mommy." His voice was so small, so scared. I pressed my hand against the door, my chest tightening. "I can't open the door, sweetie. I'm sick. Please, I'm scared." For 20 minutes, I watched this little boy cry on our porch. 20 minutes of my heart breaking while my brain screamed at me about all the ways I could die if I opened that door. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was maternal instinct. Maybe it was just human decency. But I couldn't leave him there. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed Mom's rubber cleaning gloves, then pulled winter gloves over those. Found a painter's mask from the bedroom, safety goggles from Mom's toolbox. Wrapped a scarf around my entire face until only my eyes were visible. I probably looked insane, but I grabbed the grabber stick Mom used for reaching high shelves and finally opened the door. The little boy looked up at me, confused but hopeful. I tried to guide him with the stick, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it. That's when he reached out and grabbed a strand of my hair that had fallen loose. "Your hair is pretty," he said innocently. I shut my eyes so tight that I could see stars. This was it. My hair would burn and I would die. But after a few minutes, nothing happened. Then his tiny finger brushed against my wrist, right where there was a gap between my glove and sleeve. Nothing happened. The boy was still crying, trying to tell me what his mom looked like through hiccups and sobs, but I couldn't understand him with all the layers muffling my hearing. This little boy needed human comfort, not some wrapped-up monster with a stick. That's when a thought entered my head, one I hadn't had since I was a child. Maybe I could pull down my mask. Maybe I'd be okay. My body moved faster than my mind, and suddenly I felt my hands take everything off. The mask, the gloves, everything. The boy grabbed my bare hand and whispered, "Thank you." We were both crying. I walked that little boy 2 houses down where his mom was frantically searching for him. The grass felt like velvet under my slippers. The sky was bluer than any blue I've ever seen. When we found his mom, she hugged him so tight, thanking me over and over. I stood in their yard, breathing in the outside air, feeling the sun on my skin for the first time ever. 16 years of believing I would die, and I was perfectly fine. The rage hit me like a physical force. I ran back to our house, my mind racing. If I wasn't sick, if I'd never been sick, then why? Why would she do this to me? I ripped apart her bedroom, throwing clothes from her closet. In the back, I noticed the carpet corner was loose. Underneath, a metal lockbox. Inside were 16 years of disability deposits, $7,000 monthly, all for my severe immunodeficiency. Documents she'd filled out describing how I needed 24/7 care, how I couldn't leave our controlled environment. And at the bottom of the folder, an email she'd sent to a name I didn't recognize just last week. She still believes she'll die if she goes outside. She'd kept me prisoner in my own home for money. I heard Mom's bike bell in the driveway. I didn't move from her desk, documents spread everywhere. Footsteps on the porch, keys rattling, the doorknob turning. Her eyes went from me to the empty lockbox, to the papers in my hand, to the grass stains on my slippers. 16 years, Mom. She doesn't say anything at first, just stands there staring at me like she's trying to figure out what version of herself to use. Her face goes through these changes so fast I can barely track them. First, her eyes get really wide, and her mouth opens a little like she's shocked. Then her eyebrows pull together and she looks almost scared, and then something else slides over her face that makes my stomach hurt. It's cold and calculating, like she's doing math in her head about how to fix this. She reaches behind her and pushes the door closed with this quiet click that feels louder than it should. Then she sets the book she brought me down on the dresser, moving so slowly and carefully like I'm some kind of wild animal that might bolt if she makes sudden movements. I'm still sitting at her desk with the lockbox open in front of me, and papers spread everywhere, and I can feel my heart beating so hard it hurts. She takes 3 steps toward me, and I grip the edge of the desk harder. She sits down on the bed next to where I'm sitting and reaches out like she's going to take my hand. I jerk away from her so fast I almost knock over the desk chair. She makes this sad face and her voice comes out all soft and gentle. She tells me I'm confused and I don't understand how complicated medical things are. She says there's so much about my condition that I don't know because she didn't want to scare me. I'm shaking now and I grab the email printout, the one where she wrote to someone that I still believe I'll die if I go outside. I hold it up right in front of her face and my hand is shaking so bad the paper rattles. She stops talking mid-sentence and her whole face changes again. The gentle look drops away and her jaw gets tight and her eyes go hard. She stares at the email for a long time and I watch her realize that the gentle approach isn't going to work. Then she starts crying. The tears just start pouring down her face and she's making these gasping sounds like she can't breathe. She tells me about my father leaving when I was 3, how he cleaned out their bank account and disappeared, how she had nothing and no way to take care of me. She says the medical system failed us, that she tried to get help the right way, but nobody would listen, that she had no other choice if we were going to survive. Her voice is breaking and she's reaching for me again, but I lean back further. Part of me wants to believe her because she sounds so desperate and sad, and 16 years of her being the only person in my world is hard to just turn off. But I'm looking at the bank statements scattered across the desk and the numbers don't match what she's saying. Over $1 million across 16 years. $7,000 every single month. That's not desperation money for survival. That's not just getting by. I think about the new laptop she bought herself last year, the expensive coffee maker, the designer purse I saw in her closet once. She's still crying and talking about how hard it's been, but I'm not listening anymore because the math doesn't work, and I know she's lying. When I don't say anything back or reach for her or show any sign that I believe her, everything changes again. She stops crying like someone flipped a switch. She stands up fast and her voice gets loud and angry. She tells me I'm being ungrateful after everything she's given up for me. She says I have no idea how hard it's been taking care of me every single day for 16 years, never getting a break, never having a life of her own. Her voice keeps getting louder and I'm shrinking back in the chair. She says I'm selfish and cruel for throwing this in her face, that any other mother would have given up, but she stayed and sacrificed everything. I try to say something about the money, but she talks over me. She's shouting now about how I'll end up in foster care with strangers who don't care about me, who might hurt me or abuse me. She says I can't survive out there without her, that I don't know anything about the real world, that I'll be helpless and alone and probably end up dead in a ditch somewhere. Her face is red and she's breathing hard and I realize I'm actually scared of her for the first time ever. She takes a step toward me and I grab the lockbox and all the papers I can reach and I run. I make it to my bedroom and slam the door behind me. My hands are shaking so bad I can barely turn the lock, but I manage it. I hear her footsteps in the hallway and then she's right outside my door. I back away from it and sit on my bed with the lockbox clutched against my chest. The papers are crumpled now from how hard I'm holding them, but I can't make my hands relax. I have no idea what to do. I've never made a phone call in my entire life. I've never talked to anyone except Mom. The only voice I've heard besides hers was that little boy this morning and his mother. I'm terrified, but I know I can't stay here. Something has broken between us and I don't think it can be fixed. Even if she's sick like she says, even if she was desperate, she still lied to me every single day for 16 years. She kept me locked in this house and made me believe I would die if I left. She took over $1 million by using me as her excuse. I look around my room and everything feels different now, like I'm seeing it for the first time. The air purifier in the corner that never did anything. The special filters she said cost thousands. The medicine I took every day that was probably just vitamins or sugar pills. I remember seeing an old phone in Mom's desk drawer once when I was looking for tape. I open my bedroom door just a crack and listen. I can hear her moving around in the kitchen. I slip out as quietly as I can and run back to her bedroom. The desk drawer sticks a little, but I yank it open and there's the phone under some papers and rubber bands. It's old and scratched up, but when I hold down the power button, the screen lights up. I run back to my room and lock the door again. I sit on my bed and stare at the phone for a long time. I've watched Mom use her phone before, but I've never touched one myself. I press buttons and swipe at the screen and finally figure out how to get to where I can dial numbers. My finger hovers over the 9. I know 911 is for emergencies, but what if they don't believe me? What if Mom tells them I'm crazy or sick and they believe her instead? What if calling makes everything worse somehow? What if I'm wrong about all of this and I'm ruining her life for nothing? My finger is still hovering and I can't make myself press it. Mom starts banging on my bedroom door and I jump so hard I almost drop the phone. Her voice comes through the door and it's different again, softer and pleading. She says we can work this out together, that she'll get help, that we both need help, and we can do it as a family. She sounds almost normal, almost like the Mom I thought I knew. Then her voice changes and gets harder. She says if I don't open the door right now, she's going to take the phone away from me. She says she'll lock up all the evidence and I'll never see it again. She says nobody will believe me without proof. I look down at the lockbox and papers spread across my bed. She's right that I need the evidence. But I also need help and the only way to get help is to call. My heart is pounding so hard I feel dizzy. I press the 9 and then the 1 and then another one. The phone starts ringing. A woman's voice answers and asks what my emergency is. I try to talk, but nothing comes out at first. I swallow hard and force words out in this whisper I barely recognize. I tell her I need help. I tell her my mother has been committing fraud and keeping me prisoner. My voice is shaking and I'm talking too fast and probably not making sense. The woman asks me questions and I don't know how to answer most of them. She asks for my address and I realize I don't know it. I've never needed to know our address because I've never been anywhere. She asks what town I'm in, and I don't know that either. I can barely explain what's happening because it sounds so crazy when I try to say it out loud. I tell her about the fake illness and the disability money and being kept inside for 16 years. She probably thinks I'm insane. I'm crying now and the words are coming out all jumbled and I'm sure she's going to hang up or tell me this isn't a real emergency. But she doesn't hang up. Her voice stays calm and gentle and she tells me she's sending police to help me. She asks me to stay on the line with her, and she starts asking me gentle questions about the house and what I can see out my window. She tells me I'm doing the right thing and that help is coming. I hear Mom go quiet outside my door. For a minute, I think maybe she gave up, but then I hear the front door open and close. I don't know if she's leaving or getting something from outside or what. The woman on the phone keeps talking to me and asking questions, and I try to answer, but I'm so scared I can barely think. She stays on the line for what feels like forever. She tells me police are almost there. I'm still holding the phone pressed against my ear when I hear a car pull up outside. I hear voices at the front door and I creep over to my bedroom door to listen. Mom is talking to someone and her voice sounds completely normal and calm and concerned. I hear her say something about her immunocompromised daughter having a mental health crisis. My stomach drops. She's telling them I'm sick and crazy. She's going to make them believe her instead of me. I press my ear against the door and try to hear what the police are saying, but I can't make it out. This was a huge mistake. They're going to believe her because she sounds so reasonable and normal, and I'm the one locked in a bedroom with a phone I'm not supposed to have. I'm the one who's been inside her whole life with no proof I'm normal or sane. The woman on the phone is still talking, but I can barely hear her over the sound of my own heartbeat. I hear footsteps coming down the hallway toward my room and my whole body goes stiff. There's a knock on my door, much firmer than Mom's earlier attempts. A woman's voice says she's a police officer and needs to speak with me. I look at the phone in my hand and the dispatcher tells me it's okay, that I should talk to them. Mom's voice comes from behind the officer, saying something about me being fragile and confused. The officer asks Mom to step back and give us space. I hear Mom make this small noise like she's hurt, but then her footsteps move away. I unlock my door with shaking hands and pull it open just a crack. The female officer is maybe 30 years old with her hair pulled back tight. She has kind eyes, but her expression is serious. She asks if she can come in, and I nod because I don't trust my voice. She steps inside and closes the door most of the way, leaving it open just a few inches. I can hear Mom hovering right outside, her breathing loud and fast. The officer introduces herself, but I immediately forget her name because I'm too busy trying to remember how to act normal around people. She asks if I'm the one who called, and I nod again. Then I remember the lockbox and grab it off my bed, shoving it toward her along with all the papers. My hands are shaking so bad that some of the documents flutter to the floor. I try to explain about the fake illness and the money and being kept inside for 16 years, but the words come out all jumbled and wrong. I sound crazy even to myself. The officer holds up a hand gently and tells me to slow down, that she's here to help. She starts looking through the documents, her eyes moving fast across the pages. I watch her face change as she reads, especially when she gets to the email about me still believing the lie. Her jaw tightens and she looks up at me with this expression I can't read. She pulls out her radio and calls for backup and a supervisor, her voice calm but urgent. Mom must hear this because she pushes the door open wider, asking what's going on. The officer turns to Mom and tells her very firmly that she needs to wait in another room while they investigate. Mom's face does this thing where it kind of crumples and suddenly she's crying. Not the quiet tears from before, but these big sobbing sounds. She starts saying she did what she had to do, that she loves me more than anything, that I don't understand how hard it's been. The officer motions to her partner, a male officer I hadn't even noticed standing in the hallway. He gently guides Mom toward the living room, and I hear her voice getting farther away, still explaining and crying and begging them to understand. The female officer asks me more questions about the documents, about my life, about Mom. I answer as best I can, but everything feels surreal, like this is happening to someone else. She takes photos of the documents with her phone, then photos of my room. She asks about the air purifiers and the duct tape on my window, and all the medical supplies Mom kept around. I show her the cabinet full of pills that were supposed to be keeping me alive, the special filters, all of it. She writes everything down in a small notebook. More cars pull up outside and I hear voices and radio chatter. A man in regular clothes comes to my door and introduces himself as a detective. Behind him is a woman who says she's a social worker. My room suddenly feels way too small with all these people in it. The detective starts asking me the same questions the officer already asked, and I have to explain everything again. Then the social worker asks different questions about my daily life and my relationship with Mom. I try to answer, but I keep losing track of what they're asking, because I've never had a real conversation with strangers before. The social worker has a soft voice, and she keeps telling me I'm doing great, but I can't look at her face for more than a second at a time. It's too much, too intense. The detective takes the lockbox and all the documents, putting them in plastic bags. He photographs my room from different angles: the air purifiers, the window, my bed. Everything that was private and mine is now evidence of what Mom did. I can hear Mom in the other room talking to the other officer, her voice rising and falling. Sometimes she's crying, sometimes she sounds angry, sometimes she sounds like the Mom I've always known, calm and reasonable. That's almost worse than the crying. The detective tells me they're taking all the evidence and that Mom is being arrested for disability fraud and child endangerment. The words don't feel real. Arrested. My mom. I move to my window and look out at the driveway. The male officer is walking Mom outside and there are handcuffs on her wrists. The metal catches the late afternoon light. Mom looks up at my window and our eyes meet for just a second. Her face is all blotchy from crying and her expression is something I've never seen before. Maybe it's regret. Or maybe she's mad at me for ruining everything. Or maybe she's just tired of pretending. I don't know. I can't read it. They put her in the back of a police car and I watch until it drives away, the taillights disappearing down our long driveway. The house feels empty in a way it never has before, even though there are still people here. The social worker sits down on my bed and pats the space next to her. I sit but keep as much distance as I can. She explains that I can't stay in the house alone tonight, that I need to come with her to a safe place. Panic hits me so hard I can't breathe for a second. Leaving. Actually leaving. Not just stepping outside for a few minutes, but leaving and not coming back. This is the only home I've ever known. Every corner of this house is familiar. Safe. Mine. The social worker keeps talking in that soft voice, explaining about emergency foster care and what will happen tomorrow. She says I can pack a bag with clothes and anything important I want to bring. I stand up and my legs feel weird, like they might not hold me. I pull out the small backpack I've never used because I've never gone anywhere. I don't even know what to pack. The social worker helps me, suggesting things like toothbrush and pajamas and a change of clothes. My hands are shaking. So bad I can barely fold anything. I grab a few books and the stuffed bear I've had since I was little. Everything else feels either too important to leave or not important enough to bring. The social worker is patient, not rushing me even though I can tell she wants to get going. We walk out the front door together and I step onto the porch. The sun is setting and everything is painted orange and pink. The world feels impossibly huge, stretching out in every direction with no walls to contain it. I did this walk earlier today with a little boy, but that felt temporary, like a dream. This feels permanent and real and terrifying. The social worker's car is parked in the driveway, and she opens the passenger door for me. I climb in and immediately press myself against the door, as far from her as I can get. She starts the engine and we begin moving. I've never been in a moving car before. The trees slide past the windows and my stomach lurches with every turn. The motion is wrong, disorienting, like the whole world is tilting. We reach the end of our long driveway and turn onto an actual road with other cars. Headlights coming toward us, red taillights ahead of us, street lights starting to flicker on. The social worker tries to make small talk, asking about my favorite books and subjects I might be interested in studying. I can't answer. My throat is too tight and I'm too busy trying not to completely fall apart. Every sound is too loud, every light too bright, every movement too fast. We drive for maybe 20 minutes, but it feels like hours. Finally, we pull up to a normal-looking house in a neighborhood with other houses close by. The social worker tells me this is an emergency foster home with a nice couple who help kids in situations like mine. We walk up to the front door and she rings the bell. An older couple answers, probably in their 60s. The woman introduces herself as Perdita, and the man is Jeremiah Spears. They smile at me and say welcome, and I can't process any of it. Their faces are kind, but they're strangers, complete strangers, and I'm supposed to stay in their house. Perdita shows me down a hallway to a small bedroom. There's a bed with a flowered bedspread and a dresser and a window with actual curtains. She tells me the bathroom is across the hall and that I should make myself comfortable. Then she and the social worker and Jeremiah all leave me alone. I sit on the bed and stare at the wall. The house makes noises I don't recognize, settling sounds and footsteps from other rooms and the hum of appliances. I can hear Perdita and Jeremiah talking quietly somewhere, their voices a low murmur. 3 hours pass and I don't move except to shift positions when my legs go numb. I can't sleep even though I'm exhausted. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mom's face in the police car window, or I imagine someone coming into this room, or I remember that I'm in a stranger's house and might never go home again. Morning comes eventually, and I hear sounds in the kitchen. Perdita knocks softly on my door and tells me breakfast is ready. I force myself to stand up and walk out there. The kitchen is bright with sunlight and there's food on the table. Eggs and toast and orange juice. Perdita and Jeremiah are already sitting down and they gesture for me to join them. I sit in the empty chair and stare at my plate. I don't know what to do. Do I wait for them to start eating? Do I say something first? Do I ask permission? I've never eaten a meal with anyone except Mom, and she always served me in my room. Jeremiah picks up his fork and starts eating, and I guess that means I can too. I pick up my fork, but my hand is shaking, and I feel their eyes on me even though they're trying to act normal. Perdita asks if I slept okay, and I manage to shake my head no. She makes a sympathetic sound and says that's understandable given everything I've been through. I take a tiny bite of eggs and they taste like nothing because my mouth is too dry. The silence stretches out and I can tell they don't know what to say to me. I'm too weird, too broken, too much. They probably regret agreeing to take me in. Jeremiah tries asking about what grade I should be in, and I have to explain I've never been to the school. Perdita's eyes get sad, and she exchanges a look with Jeremiah. We finish breakfast in awkward quiet, and I escape back to the bedroom as soon as I can, leaving my plate half full because I couldn't swallow another bite. I spend the rest of the morning sitting on the bed staring at the wall. Around noon, I hear a car pull up outside and voices at the front door. Perdita knocks softly and tells me the social worker is here with a doctor who needs to examine me. My stomach drops. I follow them to the living room where a woman in scrubs is setting up equipment on the coffee table. She introduces herself and explains she needs to do a physical exam and take some blood samples to confirm I don't actually have an immunodeficiency. I nod, but my hands are already shaking. The doctor asks me to sit on the couch and starts by checking my eyes and ears with different tools. Each time she moves closer, I flinch away without meaning to. She's patient and keeps explaining what she's doing before she does it, but my body won't stop reacting like she's going to hurt me. When she needs to listen to my heart, I have to lift my shirt and I feel exposed and vulnerable with all these strangers watching. The stethoscope is cold against my skin and I jump at the contact. She moves it around my chest and back, asking me to breathe deeply, and I try to follow instructions, but my breathing is too fast and shallow. Next comes blood pressure, which involves a tight cuff squeezing my arm until it hurts. Then she needs blood samples and produces several glass tubes and a needle. I've never had a needle before, never had any medical procedure that mom didn't fake with vitamin pills and placebo shots. The doctor ties rubber tubing around my upper arm and swabs the inside of my elbow with something cold and wet. I watch the needle approach my skin and close my eyes tight. The prick is sharp, and then there's a weird pulling sensation as she fills tube after tube with my blood. I feel dizzy watching the red liquid flow out of my body. When she's finally done, she puts a cotton ball and tape over the spot and tells me to keep pressure on it. The whole exam takes almost an hour, and by the end I'm exhausted and shaking. The doctor reviews her initial findings with the social worker while I sit there trying not to cry. She says preliminary observations show I'm completely healthy, no signs of immune system problems or serious illness. However, I have severe vitamin D deficiency from lack of sunlight exposure and noticeable muscle weakness from lack of physical activity and exercise. She recommends supplements and physical therapy along with regular checkups to monitor my progress. The social worker writes everything down and thanks the doctor, who packs up her equipment and leaves. I go back to the bedroom and lie down, my arm throbbing where she took the blood. The next week becomes a blur of appointments. Tuesday. I meet with a different doctor who does more tests and asks detailed questions about my medical history that I can't answer, because everything mom told me was lies. Wednesday, the social worker takes me to a therapist office where I sit in an uncomfortable chair while a woman asks how I'm feeling and I don't know what to say. Thursday, 2 police investigators come to the Spears house and interview me for 3 hours about mom's fraud, making me go through the whole story again in painful detail. Friday, I have another appointment with the first doctor to go over test results. Each interaction drains me completely because I have to explain my situation over and over to strangers, while also trying to learn basic social skills I should have developed years ago. The therapist keeps reminding me to make eye contact when people talk to me, but it feels wrong and uncomfortable, like I'm doing something I shouldn't. The investigators expect me to remember specific dates and details I never paid attention to because I thought I was dying and nothing else mattered. Every appointment means getting in a car and going somewhere new and being around people I don't know, and by the end of each day I'm so overwhelmed I can barely function. On Monday of the second week, the detective handling mom's case comes to talk to me privately. He sits across from me at the Spears kitchen table and opens a folder full of documents. He explains they've frozen all of mom's bank accounts and found evidence of systematic fraud going back the full 16 years. Bank statements showing the monthly deposits, fake medical bills she submitted to justify the payments, forged doctor signatures on disability paperwork. He says the district attorney is building a strong case and will likely charge her with multiple felonies including fraud and child endangerment. Then he asks if I'll be willing to testify if it goes to trial. The thought makes me feel sick. Standing up in a courtroom in front of strangers, talking about everything that happened, seeing mom there watching me. I tell him I don't know, and he nods like he expected that answer. He says I have time to decide and gives me his card in case I think of anything else that might help the case. After he leaves, I throw up in the bathroom. 3 days later, the social worker tells me mom was released on bail. My whole body goes cold. She's out there somewhere, free, while I'm stuck here with strangers. The social worker quickly explains there's a restraining order so mom can't contact me or come near me. But then she pulls out 2 letters from her bag. Mom sent them through her lawyer asking the social worker to give them to me. The social worker holds them out and asks if I want to read them. I stare at the envelopes with mom's handwriting on the front. Part of me desperately wants to know what she has to say, whether she's sorry, whether she can explain in a way that makes sense. But I'm still too angry and confused and hurt. I shake my head and the social worker puts them back in her bag, saying she'll keep them in case I change my mind later. Living with the Spears family gets harder instead of easier. I don't know how to work the microwave or the washing machine or even the television remote. Perdita tries to teach me, but I can see the frustration in her eyes when I can't figure out things that should be obvious. I have a panic attack in the grocery store when too many people crowd around me in an aisle, and Perdita has to walk me outside while Jeremiah finishes the shopping. Their adult son visits with his wife and baby, and I hide in my room because I can't handle being around more strangers, especially a crying infant whose sounds make my anxiety spike. I overhear Perdita and Jeremiah talking quietly about whether they're equipped to handle my level of needs. The therapist I've been seeing has an office with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, but I spend most of our first real session just sitting there in silence. She's a calm older woman who specializes in trauma and extreme isolation cases, and she doesn't push me to talk when I can't find words. She asks gentle questions about how I'm adjusting and what I'm feeling, but I don't know how to answer. I've never talked about feelings before, never had someone ask what I'm experiencing or why. Mom told me what to feel and think, and I just accepted it. Now I'm supposed to identify and articulate emotions I don't have names for. The therapist seems okay with the silence, though. She tells me we'll go at my pace and that just showing up is progress. After a few weeks, the social worker tells me she's found a more specialized foster placement that might be a better fit. A woman named Dolores Hancock who's worked with severely traumatized kids before and has experience with cases like mine. The thought of moving again terrifies me. Just when I'm starting to figure out the Spears house and routine, I have to go somewhere new with another stranger. But I can tell the Spears are relieved even though they try to hide it. We pack up my few belongings and the social worker drives me across town to a smaller house with a neat yard. Dolores answers the door and she's different from what I expected. She's maybe 50 with gray streaks in her dark hair, and she doesn't do the anxious hovering thing Perdita did. She shakes my hand firmly and shows me to my room without making a big deal about anything. Her approach is matter-of-fact and straightforward in a way that somehow feels easier than the Spears family's nervous kindness. She gives me a quick tour of the house, shows me where everything is, and explains her basic rules and expectations. Dinner is at 6. I'm responsible for keeping my room clean. If I need something, I should ask directly instead of hinting. She treats me like a capable person who's learning, rather than a fragile victim who might break. That night, I lie in another unfamiliar bed in another strange room trying to fall asleep. When I finally drift off, I dream about Mom. In the dream, she's locking me in my old room and I'm screaming that I know the truth, but she just smiles sadly and says she's protecting me. Then the dream shifts and she's crying on the floor surrounded by the scattered documents and I'm the one standing over her. I wake up disoriented and sweating, not sure for a few seconds where I am. Dolores's house is dark and quiet, and I don't know which version of my mother is real. The one who imprisoned me for money, or the one who maybe believed in some twisted way she was keeping me safe? Maybe both versions existed at the same time, and I'll never understand how that's possible. The prosecutor's office was in a building downtown that smelled like old carpet and coffee. The woman who handled Mom's case had short gray hair and wore a dark blue suit that looked expensive. She spread papers across the table between us and explained that Mom was facing 4 felony counts of fraud and 1 count of child endangerment. Each fraud charge carried a maximum of 5 years in prison. The math made my stomach hurt. She asked what outcome I wanted, and I just stared at the papers because I didn't know how to answer that question. Did I want Mom in prison? Did I want her to get away with it? The prosecutor waited patiently while I sat there frozen, and finally I managed to say I didn't know. She nodded like she expected that answer and told me I didn't have to decide anything today. We could talk again after I'd had more time to process everything. The social worker drove me back to Dolores's house, and I went straight to my room and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling for 2 hours. In therapy the next week, I tried to explain how confused I felt about Mom. My therapist asked what specifically confused me, and I said that the fraud was so planned out, so deliberate, 16 years of lying and fake documents and stealing money. But maybe Mom also really believed she was protecting me in some twisted way. Maybe she convinced herself the lie was necessary. My therapist said those two things could both be true at the same time. People with certain mental illnesses can create whole realities they believe in, while also knowing on some level that they're lying. Understanding that Mom might be genuinely sick didn't make what she did okay, but it made the anger harder to hold on to. I wanted to just hate her because that would be simpler. Instead, I felt angry and sad and guilty all mixed together in a way that made my chest hurt. Dolores's niece came to visit on a Saturday afternoon, and Dolores asked if I wanted to hang out with her for a bit. The girl was maybe 15 with long dark hair and a ponytail, and she wore ripped jeans and a band shirt I didn't recognize. She sat on the couch next to me and started talking about some show she was watching, and I had no idea what she was talking about. She mentioned characters and plot points like I should know them, and I just nodded along, feeling completely lost. Then she asked if I'd seen it, and I had to admit I'd never watched any TV shows, really. She looked surprised, but not in a mean way, and asked what I did for fun. I said I mostly read books, and she asked what kind, and we talked about that for a while. She was patient when I didn't understand references to other popular things, and she explained stuff without making me feel stupid. After she left, I felt exhausted, but also kind of happy. That's what normal friendship might feel like, I thought. Just talking about regular things with someone who didn't treat me like I was broken. The social worker came over the following Tuesday with a folder full of forms. She said we needed to start getting my proper documentation together, so I could eventually get a driver's license and apply for college, and do all the normal things people do. We started with my birth certificate, which apparently Mom had but never showed me. The social worker had gotten a copy from the county records office. Seeing my name printed on official paper with my birth date and place of birth made something feel real in a way it hadn't before. Then we worked on getting my social security card reissued since I'd never had one in my possession. Each form we filled out felt like proof that I existed as a real person in the world, and not just as Mom's secret prisoner. The social worker explained that my medical records were complicated because Mom had created a whole fake medical history for me with doctors who didn't exist. We'd need real doctors to examine me and create actual records showing my true health status. It was going to take months to untangle all of Mom's lies and replace them with truth. 2 weeks after that, the social worker called and said Mom's lawyer had contacted her requesting a supervised meeting between me and Mom. He said Mom wanted healing and closure and a chance to explain things to me properly. The social worker asked if I wanted to do it, and I felt my whole body go tense. Part of me was terrified to see Mom again, but part of me desperately needed answers about why she did this, and whether she ever really loved me and what she was thinking all those years. I said yes before I could change my mind, and the social worker set it up for the following Monday. The meeting happened in a bland office at the social services building with gray walls and uncomfortable plastic chairs. The social worker sat in the corner taking notes while I sat at the table waiting. When Mom walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair had more gray in it, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She looked older and tired and sad. She started crying the second she saw me and reached out like she wanted to hug me, but the social worker said no physical contact. I just sat there feeling numb and disconnected, like I was watching this happen to someone else. Mom tried to explain through her tears that it started as temporary desperation, after my father left her with nothing. She said she had no job skills and no money and no way to support us. The disability payment seemed like a solution at first just to get through a hard time, but then months turned into years, and it became impossible to stop without admitting the fraud. She insisted she loved me and tried to make my life as good as possible within the constraints she'd created. She said she bought me books and art supplies and tried to make our home comfortable. She said she thought she was keeping me safe from a dangerous world, but it all sounded like excuses to me. Loving someone doesn't mean locking them in a house for 16 years. Wanting to protect someone doesn't mean lying about a deadly illness. I sat there listening and felt nothing but coldness inside. I finally asked her directly if she ever planned to let me out. Mom's face crumpled and she admitted she didn't know. She said she kept thinking she'd figure something out, but years kept passing, and the lie became her whole life too. She was trapped by it just like I was, she said. She begged me to understand that she was sick and needed help, not prison. She said she'd get treatment and make things right somehow. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and comfort her like I used to when she cried, but I stayed silent and still. After a while, the social worker said our time was up and Mom was escorted out still crying. After the meeting, I felt worse instead of better. I thought seeing Mom and hearing her explanation would give me some kind of closure, but instead I just felt more confused about everything. In my next therapy session, I told my therapist that I didn't know what to feel or think anymore. She said I could acknowledge that Mom probably had real mental illness and genuine desperation, while still holding her responsible for the harm she caused me. Those things weren't opposites. Mom being sick didn't erase what she did to me. Mom being desperate didn't make the 16 stolen years okay. I could understand her situation and still be angry about mine. That made sense in my head, but my feelings were still a tangled mess. 3 days later, the prosecutor called and said they were offering Mom a plea deal. Mom would admit to the fraud charges and agree to pay restitution from the remaining money in her accounts. She'd serve 5 years of probation with required psychiatric treatment instead of going to prison. The prosecutor asked my opinion on the deal, and I realized I didn't want Mom in prison. I didn't want her to suffer in some cell somewhere, but I also never wanted to see her again. I told the prosecutor that, and she said the deal could include a restraining order preventing Mom from contacting me until I turned 18 and could decide for myself. That felt right somehow. Mom would get help and pay back the money, and I'd be free to build my own life without her in it. Mom signed the plea deal 2 days later. The social worker called to tell me it was official, and that Mom agreed to everything, including the restraining order. I wouldn't have to see her or hear from her until I turned 18 and could decide for myself if I wanted contact. Part of me felt relieved, but another part felt sad in a way I couldn't explain. The next week, my tutor arrived for our first session. Her name was Miss Duffy, and she brought boxes of workbooks designed for elementary school kids. She spread them across Dolores's kitchen table and asked me to try some basic math problems so she could see where I was at. I stared at the addition problems meant for third graders, and my face burned with shame. I was 16 years old doing math that little kids could solve. But I also felt excited because I'd always wondered about numbers and how they worked. Miss Duffy was patient when I got things wrong and didn't treat me like I was stupid. She just explained things different ways until something clicked. We met 3 times a week, and slowly I started understanding concepts I'd never learned. Dolores took me grocery shopping that same week to practice normal life skills. The store was overwhelming with its bright lights and crowds of people pushing carts. I froze just inside the entrance while Dolores gently guided me toward the produce section. She showed me how to pick out apples and check if they were ripe. My hands shook as I put items in the cart because everyone seemed to be staring at me even though they probably weren't. We practiced using the self-checkout machine, and I scanned items one at a time while anxiety made my chest tight. Dolores didn't rush me or act annoyed when I messed up. She just helped me fix the mistake and kept going. Each trip to the store got slightly easier, but I was always exhausted afterward from the stress of being around so many strangers. We also practiced taking the bus, which terrified me even more than the grocery store. Dolores rode with me the first few times and showed me how to read the schedule and pay the fare. I sat pressed against the window watching the world go by and trying not to panic about being in this moving box with strangers. Everything felt dangerous even though I knew logically that I was fine. I was determined to learn these basic skills that everyone else knew how to do. I wanted to prove I could survive in the world Mom said would kill me. 3 weeks after starting tutoring, I woke up with a scratchy throat and stuffy nose. Panic hit me immediately. My body ached and I felt hot and cold at the same time. I stumbled to Dolores's room and woke her up crying that something was wrong with me. She felt my forehead and said I probably just had a cold. But I couldn't stop thinking that maybe Mom was partially right. Maybe I was fragile and vulnerable and couldn't handle the outside world. Maybe my body was breaking down now that I wasn't in the controlled environment anymore. Dolores called my doctor, who confirmed it was just a common cold. My therapist talked me through it during our next session. She explained that normal people get sick sometimes, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with their immune system. It's just part of being alive and being around other humans. The cold went away after a week and I felt stupid for panicking so much. But my therapist said it made sense that I'd be scared given everything Mom told me for 16 years. A few days after I recovered, the doorbell rang and Dolores answered it. The little boy from that first day stood there with his mother. I recognized them immediately even though it had been over a month since everything happened. His mother asked if she could come in and talk to me. We sat in Dolores's living room and she thanked me again for helping her son that day. She said she'd been worried about me and wanted to check how I was doing. The little boy showed me a drawing he'd made of us holding hands. Seeing him reminded me of the exact moment everything changed, when his tiny hand touched mine and I realized I wouldn't die. I told his mother I was grateful it happened, even though everything since had been terrifying. She squeezed my hand and said I was brave. After they left, I cried for reasons I couldn't fully explain. The social worker helped me apply for disability support the following week. It felt weird and complicated given what Mom had done, but the social worker explained I qualified for assistance as someone recovering from severe trauma and educational neglect. The paperwork asked questions about my limitations and needs. I had to describe how I struggled with basic tasks that normal teenagers could do easily. It was humiliating but also necessary because I needed help during this transition period. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was getting real disability support after Mom's fake disability fraud, but my situation was true even if it felt strange. My therapist suggested I start attending a support group for teens in foster care. I was terrified to be around a group of strangers my own age, but I went to the first meeting and sat in the back corner hoping no one would notice me. A girl with bright red hair sat down next to me and introduced herself as Abigail Bailey. She cracked jokes during the meeting and didn't seem bothered by the heavy topics everyone discussed. Afterward, she asked if I wanted to exchange numbers. I admitted I didn't have a phone yet, and she just shrugged and said we'd figure it out. Abigail became my first real friend. She didn't treat me like I was fragile or broken. She just accepted that I was weird and learning, and that was okay. The next week, Abigail invited me to hang out outside of group. She suggested getting coffee at a shop near the community center. I agreed even though the idea made me anxious. We sat at a small table by the window, and Abigail talked easily about music and movies and things happening at her school. I was awkward and didn't understand half the cultural references she made, but she just explained things without making me feel stupid. She filled the silences when I couldn't think of what to say. I watched other teenagers laughing and talking around us and felt like I was seeing a world I'd never been part of. Abigail didn't seem bothered when I admitted I'd never heard of popular bands or didn't know what certain slang words meant. She just filled me in and kept the conversation going. During my next therapy session, I talked about my complicated feelings about Mom. I was angry about the 16 stolen years, but I was also grieving the mother I thought I had, the one who sacrificed everything to keep me safe. My therapist helped me understand that both versions existed in some way. Mom probably did have real mental illness and genuine desperation, but that didn't erase what she did to me. Her being sick didn't make the 16 years okay. I could understand her situation and still be angry about mine. Those things weren't opposites. I didn't have to choose between hating her completely or forgiving her completely. I could hold both truths at the same time. The prosecutor called a few days later with news about the restitution from Mom's plea deal. The money was being put into a trust fund for my future education and living expenses. It wasn't anywhere near the full amount Mom had collected over 16 years, but it was enough to give me some financial stability as I figured out my life. The social worker explained how the trust worked and when I'd be able to access the money. Knowing I had that safety net made the future feel slightly less terrifying, even though everything was still overwhelming and uncertain. A week later, Dolores drove me back to the house to pack up my remaining stuff before it got sold to cover Mom's legal fees. The whole drive there, my stomach felt twisted up and I kept picking at the edge of my sleeve. Dolores didn't try to make small talk, which I was grateful for. She just drove and let me sit with whatever I was feeling. When we pulled into the driveway, I stared at the house through the windshield for a full minute before I could make myself open the car door. Everything looked the same, but smaller somehow. The trees that used to seem so tall now just looked like regular trees. The house that had been my entire universe for 16 years was just a regular house that needed new paint. Dolores unlocked the front door with the key the social worker had given her, and we stepped inside. The air smelled stale and dusty because nobody had been there in weeks. I walked through the living room, touching the couch where I used to read for hours, the kitchen table where Mom and I ate every meal together, the windowsill where I used to watch butterflies, My feet carried me down the hall to my bedroom without me really deciding to go there. I pushed open the door and just stood in the doorway staring. The room looked so small. For 16 years, this space had been everything. My bed, my desk, my bookshelf, the duct-taped window. Now it just looked like a sad little room where a kid had been kept prisoner. I walked to the closet and started pulling out boxes of my things. Old books, art supplies, random stuff I'd collected over the years. At the bottom of the closet, I found a stack of journals I'd kept when I was younger. I sat down on the floor and opened the first one. The pages were filled with drawings of places I'd imagined. Parks with swings and slides, schools with lockers and cafeterias, houses with front yards where kids played. I'd drawn families having picnics and people walking dogs and kids riding bikes. On every page were stories I'd written about what I thought the outside world was like. Most of it was completely wrong because I'd only seen pictures in books. I'd imagined that grass was rough like carpet, and that wind made a whistling sound you could hear from inside buildings. I'd thought everyone outside wore masks because of germs, and that cars were much bigger than they actually were. Reading these journals made my chest hurt in a way that was hard to describe. I wanted to reach back through time and tell that little girl that she wasn't sick, that mom was lying, that she deserved to go outside and have friends and live a normal life. But I couldn't. That little girl was gone, and I was what was left. I closed the journals and packed them in a box because even though they hurt to read, I couldn't throw them away. Dolores helped me carry everything out to her car. We made 3 trips back and forth, loading boxes into the trunk and back seat. On the last trip, I stood in my old bedroom one more time. I tried to remember what it felt like to believe this room was keeping me safe, to think the outside world would kill me, but I couldn't access that feeling anymore. Now I just felt angry and sad and confused. I turned off the light and closed the door behind me. 2 days later, Dolores drove me across town to a building that housed the transitional living program for foster kids aging out of the system. A social worker met us in the lobby and took us upstairs to show me my apartment. It was small, just one room with a bed and desk and tiny kitchen area, plus a bathroom, but it was mine. My own space that nobody else controlled. The social worker explained the rules about quiet hours and checking in with staff and attending required life skills classes. She gave me keys and showed me how to lock the door. After she left, I sat on the bed and looked around. I had my own apartment. The thought was exciting and terrifying at the same time. What if I couldn't handle this much independence? What if I messed everything up? Dolores must have seen the panic on my face because she sat down next to me. She told me I could call her anytime and that she'd check in regularly. She reminded me I had support services and that learning to live independently was a process. Then she left, and I was alone in my own place for the first time ever. I spent that first night organizing my stuff and trying not to freak out. The next week, I enrolled in an alternative high school program designed for kids who'd had their education interrupted. The intake counselor barely reacted when I explained I'd never been to the school before and was working at maybe a 5th grade level. She just nodded and said they'd work with whatever level I was at. My first day, I was so nervous I almost threw up in the parking lot. But when I walked into the classroom, nobody stared or asked invasive questions. The other students were focused on their own work. Some looked older than me, some younger. During break, one girl asked if I was new, and when I said yes, she just said cool, and went back to her phone. The teacher gave me assessment tests to figure out where to start. I did okay on reading comprehension, but struggled with math and had huge gaps in basically every subject. She created a learning plan and assigned me to work with a tutor twice a week. Over the next few weeks, I fell into a routine. School 3 days a week, therapy on Tuesdays, life skills classes on Thursdays, tutoring on Wednesdays and Fridays. Abigail and I started meeting up for coffee on Saturday afternoons when she didn't have family stuff. Some days were harder than others. I'd have panic attacks about being in public spaces or get overwhelmed by too many people talking at once. But I was learning to manage the anxiety without completely shutting down. I practiced the breathing exercises my therapist taught me. I gave myself permission to leave situations when I got too overwhelmed. 6 weeks after everything had started falling apart, I could feel myself slowly building something new. Then I had my first real fight with Dolores. She'd stopped by to check on me and noticed I hadn't been doing my laundry or cleaning my apartment properly. She started talking about responsibilities and following through on basic tasks. I got defensive and snapped at her that she wasn't my mom and couldn't tell me what to do. She stayed calm and said that actually, yes, as my caseworker, she could set expectations, and that taking care of my living space was part of learning independence. I raised my voice and said some things I didn't mean. She didn't yell back. She just waited until I was done, and then said we'd talk more when I'd calmed down. After she left, I felt awful, but also kind of relieved. I'd gotten angry at her, and she hadn't made it about her feelings or used it to manipulate me. She'd just held her boundary and let me have my emotions. The next day, I called and apologized. She accepted it, and we talked about better ways to handle conflict. I realized this was what normal teenage development looked like. Testing boundaries, getting frustrated, learning to communicate. Dolores wasn't mom. She could handle my anger without making me feel like a bad person for having feelings. During my next tutoring session, my tutor told me I was making really good progress. She said if I kept working this hard, I might be able to take the GED exam within a year. Having that concrete goal made everything feel more real. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actually working toward something. That night, I sat down at my desk and wrote a letter to Mom. I didn't plan to send it. My therapist had suggested writing down everything I felt as a way to process things. So I wrote about the anger and betrayal. about the 16 years she stole from me, about how I'd believed her lies and trusted her completely. But I also wrote about the complicated love I still felt, about missing the version of her who held me when I cried, about grieving the mother I thought I had. I wrote about how I understood she might have been desperate and mentally ill, but that didn't make what she did okay. When I finished, the letter was 4 pages long and I was crying. I folded it up and put it in my desk drawer. My therapist was right. I didn't need to send it. Writing it was enough. The following Saturday, Abigail picked me up and took me to the mall. She was determined to help me experience normal teenage stuff I'd missed. We went to a movie theater and she bought tickets for some comedy everyone at her school had seen. Sitting in the dark theater surrounded by strangers eating popcorn felt surreal. After the movie, we walked around the mall and she explained references and jokes I hadn't understood. She showed me how to use social media apps and helped me set up accounts even though I was nervous about being online. We went into clothing stores and she helped me pick out things I actually liked instead of the plain practical stuff Mom had always ordered online. She taught me about different music genres and made me playlists. She was patient when I didn't know things that seemed obvious to everyone else. Having a friend who treated me like a normal person instead of a victim made me feel more human. One night I was lying in bed in my small apartment, and I realized I was thinking about the future in concrete ways. Not just surviving day to day, but actually planning ahead. Maybe I'd study psychology or social work after getting my GED. Maybe I'd get a job helping other kids who'd been through trauma. Maybe I'd move to a bigger city someday, or maybe I'd stay local. I didn't know yet, and that was okay. For 16 years, my future had been just more of the same. More days locked inside. More years of believing I was sick. More time in that small room thinking it was my whole world. Now the future felt wide open. It was scary because I had no idea what would happen or if I'd be okay. But it was also exciting because for the first time in my life, I got to choose what came next. I got to decide who I wanted to become. 2 weeks later, the social worker stopped by my apartment for one of her regular check-ins. She sat at my small kitchen table and told me Mom was following all her probation rules and going to the psychiatric treatment sessions they required. I nodded and looked down at my hands because I didn't want to ask how Mom was doing or if she talked about me in therapy. The social worker seemed to understand and moved on to asking about my own progress instead. I was still focused on getting through each day without falling apart, and that took all my energy. The next Saturday, Abigail took me to the mall again because I needed new shoes, and she said it would be good practice being around people. We were walking through the food court when the crowd suddenly felt too thick and too loud. My chest got tight and I couldn't breathe right, and my hands started shaking. Everything around me blurred, and I thought I might pass out right there on the sticky tile floor. Abigail noticed immediately and guided me outside to a quiet bench without making a big deal about it. She sat next to me and told me to breathe slowly while she counted. After a few minutes, the panic faded and I felt embarrassed and stupid. Abigail told me she gets anxiety attacks too sometimes and has to leave class to calm down in the bathroom. We talked for a while about how everyone struggles with something even if you can't see it from the outside. Knowing she dealt with hard things too made me feel less alone and less broken. At my next therapy session, we started working on bigger goals beyond just surviving day to day. My therapist asked what I actually wanted from my life, not just what I needed to get by. I sat there staring at the wall because I honestly didn't know how to answer. For 16 years, wanting anything was pointless because my world was one room and Mom's rules. She gave me homework to think about 3 things I might want to try or learn or become. On Monday, I started attending regular classes at the alternative school instead of just tutoring sessions. The teacher was discussing a book about a girl escaping from a cult, and she asked the class what we thought about the main character's choices. My heart pounded, but I raised my hand and said, I thought the character was brave for leaving, even though she didn't know what came next. The teacher smiled and told me I made a really good point about how courage means acting, despite fear not having no fear at all. I was exhausted and awkward during the whole class, but I did it. That evening, Dolores knocked on my apartment door and came in with takeout food for both of us. While we ate, she told me she was proud of how much progress I'd made in just 2 months. I realized I was proud too, even though everything still felt incredibly hard most days. I was learning to be a real person in the actual world instead of the prisoner Mom had created. Building a life that belonged to me felt scary, but also important. Later that night, I stood outside my apartment building watching the sun go down. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, and I thought about that little boy with the shark backpack who accidentally gave me my whole life back. I wasn't healed and I wasn't okay yet, but I was free. I was learning new things every day, and finally living in the real world instead of that isolated house. Some days I felt terrified of everything, and some days I felt angry about the 16 years Mom stole. Some days I even missed how simple my old life was when I didn't have to make choices or face strangers or figure out who I wanted to be. But I was choosing to keep moving forward into whatever came next because that was the only direction I could go now.